Shropshire Community News.
I'm Darren Oliver from InTune Radio, really excited to be talking to Anne Johnson in the first of our regular updates. Anne is the Telford implementation lead for Lloyds Bank Foundation. And I'm sure you can imagine the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is an implementation lead?
Oh, thank you, Darren. Essentially, when we see the word lead, it's about leading change in the borough. So it's somebody who has that kind of helicopter view over what's happening in an area, and then working out how to implement the changes and lead on those changes. And I guess lead on them in the first instance, hoping that people will follow, and then I can support them. So that I think the role, even though it says lead, will keep changing as this work progresses. I'm there to listen to the people in the communities, find out what they want to see change, and then work with them to implement that change.
And Telford in particular was chosen, I take it, by Lloyds Bank in order to set this up. So do you know why they chose Telford?
They chose 6 areas within the UK. And when you think about Lloyds Bank Foundation, it's separate from the bank. It's funded by the bank, but it's a separate entity. And traditionally, they are funders. So you might think about filling in a funding application form, sending it off. If you're fortunate to receive funding, then you'll receive the funding or not. So this is a different way that they're looking at this. So they're looking at, actually, what if we had a close look at an area, looked at what they really needed? They may not need money, or they may need the money that they've got already spent differently. And then we can see what's required and then see how that we can make that happen. So that meant, which areas of the 6 did they choose? Why would they choose them? We've got Telford. I believe, and my understanding as it's kind of the work has unravelled, is Telford was chosen for a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 reasons. One is that, what is Telford? And a lot of people can't even put their fingers on what Telford actually is. Is it an authority? Is it an area? Is it a town? Interestingly, I tested it the other week and put Telford in my sat nav, and it took me to the shopping centre.
Yep.
So is it a shopping centre? So what was really interesting is what actually it is. And that might just sound like a really strange question, but I'm not sure we always stop and think about that. So Lloyd's found it quite interesting that this was a new, a kind of a new area, 50 years old. What did that mean to a borough? So that was quite interesting for them. The other was that Telford has a lot of inward investment. Doesn't necessarily change the lives of the people living in the borough. So we've got businesses setting up, organisations setting up. Does it necessarily change the lives, aspiration? Does it give greater opportunity to people living there? And statistics would suggest not. So there's something happening within the borough. So it's quite an attractive area to be part of and find out promises it has and how we can help develop that.
Mm-hmm. And so your job as the lead is for you to actually look at the area and see, where help could possibly be. But as well as that, I would imagine, do associations and charities and groups and stuff come to you as well, or is it you find them? You see what I mean?
That's a good question. Really, when you think about change and you think about how do you work out what that change might look like borough-wide, it starts with relationships. And that's why we've got this 10 years, because probably 8 years of that 10, if we were really realistic, would be discussing what we want to do, what we want to test, how would we make that happen. The last 2 years is probably making it happen. So actually, you spend a large degree of time getting to know people, having discussions. I think I've had probably about, at least 85 discussions with local organisations, big charities, local authorities, public sector organisations, people saying, what does change mean to you in Telford? What could Telford look like in 15 years' time? If we were to dream the possible, what would it look like? And what will we aim to reach? So that means that really it's about, for the first 2 to 3 years, we're 2 or 3 years in, it's all been about conversations. But what keeps coming out of those conversations is unlocking potential. if people in, not everyone in Telford, but if most people in Telford aspired or could reach or be the person they want to be, then they make better life choices. They get the foundation of who they want to be, what they want to be. They're successful in their work, in reaching the retirement they always wanted. It might not be to do with work, but something they aspired to do. So that's what keeps coming out of most of those conversations. So I would say at the moment, it is more about talking to people, finding out what they want to see change. After that, once we establish the change, we can start to bring the charities into that space, businesses into that space, in order to support the community to make it happen.
Right. And so, yes, is there a sort of, well, you were saying about it's a 10-year plan, if you like. Is there and you say about sort of 8 years and then 2 years. Is that 8 years, like that's when, if you like, the deadline is, that's when the decisions are made? Or is it it's not quite as sort of cut and dried as that?
It's not as cut as dry as that, because it is really an ambiguous role. Most jobs you go into, people will say, this is the outcome, this is what we want to achieve. These are the results we want. But this role is almost turning it around and saying, we don't know what the results are because we haven't had the conversations. Right. Now, it might be that something comes up. If I give you an example, when some of the attainment, there's challenges around attainment in the borough. And it might be that if we can bring 9 junior school leads together into one space and they can kind of visualize the possible, then it might only take 2 years to make that happen within the period. It exactly depends what people want to see happen, whether we can make that happen. Where we are in 10 years and whether that would be a cut-off isn't even definite then. I mean, the dream would be that we instigate the change, start it off, and then when the 10 years finishes, we can pull away knowing that the community now hold that change and they will continue with it.
Gosh, it certainly sounds a sort of a huge job to be kind of pulling in all directions. This is lots of opinions. I mean, and you must, as you say, you speak to lots of different people. I mean, 85 different groups and so forth in the area. Wow. and
it is wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to kind of get your head. And well, as you say, when you first were offered the job, it was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Did you have to kind of make it your, well, say you get your head around it yourself, you get your own idea of what exactly they were asking you to do?
Yes, I've worked in the community. I've worked in the community for years, running community centres, and very clear about the kind of role. This is completely different, because this is about almost shaking up a system, shaking up society. I mean, in the end, Lloyds would want, whatever starts in Telford to be replicated in other parts of the UK, for the government to understand what change we're seeking to do. So for me, in this role, I was almost for the first year going back for reassurance to Lloyds. Am I doing what you want? I'm still not clear. I've had conversations, but nothing seems to be happening. And there's more conversations. And I felt like we were sitting in the exploration stage forever. We might be talking about, we could explore this or we could explore that. And I'm kind of feeling we're starting to get over the hill with that we're starting to see some possible change. But I would say I'm still working my way through this role. It's what I do have to remind myself in this role is sometimes I wake up in the morning feeling the weight of it, thinking, actually, am I responsible for this societal change? Because we know that society is not how people want it at the moment. Austerity caused lots of pain and people, looking towards services to provide. It kind of felt like this could be huge change, and is it down to me to lead this change? And how do I sit with that? How comfortable do I sit with that? And I woke up I invariably wake up and think, I'm not sure I can carry that weight. But what I then realise is I don't have to. If it's what the community really want, if they come up with the changes they really want to see, they will own it with me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I try and own it, I'm in a way I'm leading it, and I shouldn't really be leading the change. I'm there to help them implement it.
Yes,
but I'm not there to decide what the change is. People feel uncomfortable with change. They do.
I was going to say, do you find that, people really have to, use the awful term blue sky thinking, but that sort of, come on, think about whatever you want. It's sort of difficult to change, but it's also difficult to even think what change would be and what do you actually want. We're so sort of used to what we've got that what do we want different?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes you can use different methods and different ways of helping people. I'm working with a group of 18 to 25-year-olds. And when I first sat down with them and said, okay, as somebody who's 18 in the borough, what would you like to see change? And you're absolutely right. You just get that silence. I don't really know, Anne. Could probably better transport or something like that. And then what you have to do is keep that conversation going, because then what you say is that enough? In 15 years' time, is that where your ambition lies? Is there something that's happened to you within your life that you really want to see change? Because I'm sure all of us in our homes put the world to right every week. You have those conversations, and right at the end you say, well, we put the world to right. But if somebody was then to say to you, well, what is putting the world to right? So we probably wouldn't be able to capture it.
No, but I may be completely wrong now, but is it kind of your job then to speak to some people who might say that they want the transport to be better, and then for you to go and speak to somebody else who is to do with that, get their view of it? Because you say it's all very well to say, oh, well, we could do this, 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 and this, but it can't happen because of, that. Do you ever go into like, right, okay, this is what people want. What's the problems? Why is it not happening?
Yeah, that is a really good question. When you think of change and you think of power and power of decision, this is where I've come up against some interesting conversations around change. Because some organisations, public sector organisations, probably kind of feel that they hold that change, they hold that power of change. And the issue is, if you go out into the community and start talking to people and they'll say, well, and give the transport for an example, we would like to see better transport. Well, we don't, there is kind of responses to that. Well, we don't know if we can do that, or we don't know if you can give that. So maybe you shouldn't give false expectations. But what I say is, why not have that conversation? And if people say, well, actually the transport isn't good enough, then we start to say why. And what is it we can all do together to make that change happen? Because if we just go to the transport policy holder, Minister for Transport, and say we just need the transport to be better, well, we're either going to get a yes or a no. But if we say, actually, there's a group of us and we want to work together to make this transport better, and we brought all the parties into the space who can make that happen, then it's a possible. What we tend to do is say, we're not going to ask people if they want X, Y, and Z because we don't know if we can give it them. Instead of saying, well, if you really want X and that's really important to you, how can we all work together to achieve that? So I think that is my role, to bring people into that space to say, this is what I'm finding. How can we resolve this? How can we make this different? And who would now need to be in this space to make that happen?
I see what you mean. Yes, it's kind of bringing, as you say, bringing people together who can actually come up with solutions or ideas or new ideas that haven't been thought before. And rather than throwing them out and going, oh, no, we don't do it that way. It's, well, what about doing it this way? Perhaps it'll work. Let's go and forward with it. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
There's a strategy I use sometimes called the Disney creative strategy. And you start with people being as creative as they want about change. And what you say is, the rule is there can't be any no-sayers. So nobody can go, in that stage, you can't go, oh, yeah, but we'll never get funding for that. Oh, no, we can never make that happen. And what they do is they shut down creativity immediately. So what we do is we go into the creative stage, we form the idea, and then we work out who needs to be in that space. Once we've got the idea formed, then we bring the no-sayers in who say, oh, it's a great idea and that's really fabulous change. but it won't work because of X, Y, and Z. And then what we do again then is say, we hear you, but actually in our creative brain, we can now solve those problems. But what happens usually is you don't get any further because the no-sayers are there immediately.
This has been our first chat with Anne on, as I say, we've now learnt exactly what the implementation lead of Telford does. And so we will be chatting again and we will hear how things are going, really. Tell us more about actual examples and how it's all moving along. That'd be lovely. Thank you so much for chatting today, Anne. It's been really, really interesting, and enjoy the rest of your day.